Hot Dog Days Afternoon is the first segment in the 24th episode of the first season of Mickey and the Roadster Racers, or Mickey Mouse Roadster Racers. There are just a couple more episodes in this first season, and honestly, this segment is not very good. I watched it once and got to the end of it and thought, I must be missing something, because that was really dull, nothing happened, there's nothing really to report, so I actually watched it a second time, and it was the same thing. So, it's the first time, I think the first time, where an episode of Mickey and the Roadster Racers has actually been poor, where I've actually thought the narrative was all over the place, it was really scrappy, it wasn't very good at holding my attention. I'm aware I'm not the target audience, but if every episode up until this point has been able to my adult mind, still have some level of interest, this one has just failed with that. Mickey and Pluto are trying to have a special day together, but people keep calling them back to the garage to ask them to help with various different problems. And Mickey and Pluto look like they're never going to get their special day together. And that sounds like it could be quite interesting. It's not the only episode like this where the characters are trying to do one thing but something keeps getting in their way. Will they ever get to do it? But I didn't really think it was very good. The problems that arose were not that fascinating. None of the other characters really had a very interesting role to play. And while I obviously wanted Mickey and Pluto to have their special day together, I wasn't really that bothered, which is unusual because obviously I'm not normally that negative about these characters. And there was just something about this episode that felt rushed. It felt like they were trying to throw too much into it. None of the problems were particularly interesting. And Mickey and Pluto, they were still spending time together in the car. It's not like they were separated and, not together at all. So they were still having time together. And I guess a spoiler here, I'm going to discuss the ending of this. At the end, the gang obviously try and help them have a special day together, but Pluto somehow manages to remind Mickey that actually they had spent the day together and they had had some quality time, even if it wasn't what they had planned. Which I do think is a nice way to end it, a nice message there. Just because things don't go the way you wanted them to, or the way that you expected them to, it doesn't mean it was a complete loss. So even though the episode itself was a complete loss, I think it regained a little bit of credibility with that message at the end there. So I think this is the weakest so far. This is definitely, as far as I can think back, the weakest episode of Mickey and the Roadster Racers. It wasn't completely terrible. It's not like they were being offensive or giving the wrong message, which sounds obvious, but it can happen. But I just feel like it wasn't very well developed compared to the rest of them. It didn't flow very well. It was all over the place. The characters weren't that interesting. The problems weren't that interesting. And I didn't really care about how things were going to be resolved. Maybe to a younger viewer it's a different experience. Well, I'm certain it's a different experience. But just compared to the rest of them, it definitely didn't live up.